On today's show, an emergency podcast of the highest order. Dejounte Murray is no longer going to be a member of the Atlanta Hawks. Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance, 2 first-round picks coming to Atlanta. We'll get into all of what transpired, what it all means, what the future holds, and more, and all that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1753 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening in emergency fashion. And I want to encourage you at the top of the podcast to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Please check us out and subscribe to the podcast on Apple, on Spotify, on Overcast. And also, if you are watching this podcast on video, go ahead and like this episode. And also, please subscribe to the podcast. Yeah, we're back. I recorded a podcast not very long ago. In fact, I've been doing wall-to-wall NBA draft coverage for weeks and weeks and weeks. I talked extensively about Reese Shea a couple of days ago when he was drafted. Earlier today, I did an episode. This is the second time that the Hawks have made a trade in as many days, but with apologies to AJ Griffin, who I covered in depth yesterday and even some today on a podcast that I literally did about 4 hours ago. As I'm recording this podcast, the second trade in the last 2 days was a lot bigger. So if anyone happened to listen to the show that I did only, again, 4 or 5 hours ago, I referenced a report from Jake Fisher of Yahoo in that podcast about the Hawks and the New Orleans Pelicans not having talks, or at least real talks, about Brandon Ingram. That was reported by Jake. When I discussed that, I made sure purposely to note that it was very possible that the Hawks could trade Dejounte Murray to New Orleans, even if Ingram was not involved in that trade. And I also said on that podcast I had heard some rumblings about discussions with the Pelicans and the Hawks about Murray. And yeah, obviously, I didn't have it reportable to say that Murray was going to go into New Orleans today, or I would have said that on the podcast, but it was buzzy. The buzz was loud, I will say, in conversations that I was having behind the scenes. And while the buzz is not always right, in fact, it's sometimes wrong for sure, the buzz was right in this occasion, and Murray is heading to the New Orleans Pelicans. So if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know this already, but the deal is as follows. Dejounte Murray to New Orleans and to Atlanta is going to be Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance Jr., EJ Liddell, and 2 first-round picks. One of those picks is 2025 first-rounder that New Orleans actually has from the Lakers, and the other one is a 2027 first-round pick from either the Bucks or the Pelicans as part of some machinations there, trades previously, etc. So basically, the Hawks are going to be getting 2 first-round picks plus a lottery pick from 2 years ago in Daniels, who was the 8th pick in the draft in 2022, who's a real prospect still, and then a very competent, solid, maybe not sexy, but certainly competent and solid role player in Larry Nance Jr., who may not be a starter, but certainly is a rotation-level player still at this point in time. I think Liddell is mostly a throw-in. He does have a guaranteed deal for about $2 million this coming season, so he's going to be on the roster unless he's not, and they're going to owe him money no matter what happens there. But I think mostly the deal is Daniels, Nance, and 2 picks for Dejounte Murray. I will obviously unpack the deal a lot more as we go here, but I'll start here. I think this is a pretty good value for the Atlanta Hawks. Now, there's a lot of nuance involved here. If you're a recurring listener, you will know that I'm big on nuance and depth and actual details mattering here, context, etc. I was aware of a lot of different deals that the Hawks talked about back in January and February when they were pretty openly taking offers or always discussing deals for Dejounte Murray. But unless there was an offer that I was not aware of, this deal with New Orleans is better in my mind than what they had offered to them 4, 5, 6 months ago at this point in time. Now, a lot was made of the Lakers as a potential team calling on Dejounte back then, and that definitely happened. It definitely happened a couple different times, but they were offering basically 2 picks from the Lakers and some salary filler that was, let's just say, much less appetizing to me than the combination of Daniels and Nance. And yes, you could say that these 2 picks coming to Atlanta are not incredible picks, but here's the reference point for you that I think people are kind of forgetting already. The Pelicans had a chance, if you were sort of a draft observer, you might know this, the Pelicans had a chance to take the Lakers pick this year in 2024. That was number 17 overall. It eventually became Dalton Connect. But instead of doing that, they chose to roll the pick over to 2025 after studying it for a very long time. It is not protected. It is unprotected. So there is upside with that pick. And New Orleans studied it for a year and then made the decision basically to choose to roll it over versus taking the 17th pick in the draft this year. Part of that is that this year's draft wasn't great, but by proxy, they were saying, and you have to trust them on some level here, that pick in 2025 had more value to them than the 17th pick did this year. So yes, the 27 pick is not the greatest one in the world. It's the worst of 2 picks it's still the first round pick. It's still a real pick, I would say. But the first one, 2025, is actually a pretty interesting upside play, especially given that the Lakers, yes, they have LeBron and AD, but they just were not particularly impressive this year. And there's downside risk there for sure. So anyway, zooming back out, I've already seen some people maybe disappointed or vexed or confused by the return. What I said immediately when the deal happened is what I'll still say now for the most part, is that this was always going to be in the neighborhood of the value that the Hawks got for Dejounte Murray, I would say. Now, that does not mean that it is an absolutely overwhelming package, because it's not. I wouldn't say that. It's not going to knock you over. I get that. But it's 2 first-round picks, real ones, and some positive supporting stuff in the deal. That's an appropriate return for Dejounte Murray in the market, I would say. Now, probably 6 people have asked me how Mikal Bridges got 5 first-round picks and Murray went for this. Number one, it's not the same situation. That's the biggest factor here. Without going all the way into that one, the Knicks and the entire league, by the way, agrees on this. The Knicks violently overpaid in that transaction. The whole league knows that. Bridges is really good, but not 6 first-round pick or whatever it ended up being. Plus, Bridges has more value in the market than Murray does. I think everyone would probably acknowledge that. Yes, I know Dejounte made an all-star team and Mikal did not, but Mikal is certainly, I think, viewed as more of a elastic piece, more valuable piece on the market than Dejounte at this point. Not by a ton, but still, he's a two-way wing versus a guard, all that stuff. But that's worth noting that, like, it isn't the same situation. Keep that in mind. And yes, it would have been sexier, more interesting if there was like more of that challenge trade aspect, if it would have been Murray for Ingram, 2 guys who are relatively similar in the league hierarchy, I would say. I get that. I talked about it a lot. In the end, there is some worry, I would say, across the league. I'm not sure about Atlanta, but obviously in the end they didn't do this, about Ingram's next contract because he wants the max or close to it. It's going to be a lot of money for him. And I'm not sure the Hawks wanted to be cornered into doing that, trading for him with 1 year left on his deal. Anyway, there's a reason I said on that podcast earlier today that there was a path, or a pretty clear one, to have the Hawks trade Murray to New Orleans without Ingram back. And that was not really a thing that I heard was on the radar for the most part in recent days anyway. And yes, I think that there is a disconnect on Dejounte in some circles, but here's the way that I would put it on how the league seems to view Dejounte and view him as a trade piece. Number one, he's on a good contract. That's a big part of this. Now, it's not like an absolute heist, but if you said, is Murray overpaid, underpaid, or properly paid, I would say underpaid, or at least closer to properly. There's no way he's overpaid at this point on that contract. And while I'm here, the Hawks are really, really fortunate that Murray agreed to take an extension that probably underpays him, and also one that surprised everyone, including the Hawks and including people around the league. I covered it a lot of the time, but the Hawks were limited on what they were able to offer Dejounte legally in an extension because he actually signed for pretty little in San Antonio. But basically, the Hawks offered him the best deal they possibly could have legally under the CBA. Dejounte basically said yes or no. He ended up taking the deal. And if he hadn't done that, he would be a free agent right now. And the Hawks would have either had to pay him more than what he got, I would say pretty confidently, or let him go for nothing. And obviously, getting 2 picks and stuff for him is way better than that. Yes, maybe they would have traded him in February, but they would have gotten less than this because it would have been an expiring contract. Let's just say, I know there's been a lot made of the trade when it actually happened with San Antonio, and I was on the record that day as not loving it because it was an overpay, and I think everyone knew that, and it only looked worse and worse. But on the other side, the Hawks are really fortunate, and it worked out very well for them post-trade, obviously, that Murray took the extension. Because if he didn't, they would not have gotten this back. Number 2, Murray's not an all-star. Now, I know he made an all-star team. That did happen. You can't take it away from him. Neither can I. But it was injury replacement in a different time. And basically, he's not viewed around the league as a quote-unquote all-star caliber player. He's in the next tier, or maybe the tier after that, as far as maybe 35 to 50, something like that in the league. A good player, for sure, but not an all-star. There's a notable difference there. And I'm not sure that matters in this trade, but every reference when you want to criticize this trade will probably be all-star Dejounte Murray. He's not really that level of player at this point in time. Number 3, he is clearly a point guard, preferably, playing out of position in the last 2 years. And I'll probably do more of a look back at some point about this, not today, but it simply did not work with Trey and Dejounte the way the Hawks hoped that it would. The package there, if you are just catching up now, the Hawks were hoping that Dejounte was going to both give them a number 2 option on offense, which kind of happened, I would say, but also fix their perimeter defense and put up attack defense on that side of the floor. And without piling on, because I've said this for 2 years, he has not been very good defensively. And that the theory of the case there, if nothing else, just did not work on either end of the floor, but especially on defense. And it just did not work. I mean, this year we litigated a lot, but I'll just say this as the broad number now. The Hawks were better with Trey on by himself and Dejounte on by himself than they were with the two of them together. And that just cannot happen. So there you go. So I'll do more on the trade in a second. But just to wrap this first part up, I'll always say this, but assuming the best offer they could get, which you kind of have to assume this because we'll never know all of the offers. We just cannot know all the offers. But assuming that there's some level of trust there and this is their best offer, I would have done this. Now, I'm not saying that it would have been a slam dunk. It wasn't an instant yes for the Hawks. It's not a grand slam trade. There are very few of those. Well, actually, the Nets trade for Mikal Bridges was actually a grand slam for them, I would say. It was not that. But for me, it was time to break up the guards. And that might be too simple or too broad, and I'm doing that purposely. But the Trae plus Dejounte pairing does not work. I'm convinced by that over 2 years. If it had been 1 year, you could have waved it away as like, all right, it didn't go well for 1 year. Let's see. But 2 full seasons, it just did not work. And I think when you know that, the thing to do is break them up. Personally, I've been on the record about this. I'll say it again now. I would have pursued trading Dejounte over trading Trae. It doesn't mean that Trae would have been untouchable because he's not been untouchable. But in the end, I would have preferred trading Dejounte to trading Trae. And I think the Hawks got a pretty good return here. Yes, they have work to do. They have more work to do. I promise you. There's money stuff involved here. They probably have another shot creator that they probably need because Dejounte, for some of his faults, does a really good job of lifting offensive floor because he can get his own shot whenever he wants it, the mid-range game, all that stuff. He's a hooper, and that does matter on some level. But my broad takeaway is that the deal makes organizational sense for the Hawks and where they're going now. You could argue that this makes them worse in the short term. Maybe it does because Dejounte is obviously better than the guys they're getting back. But given the sort of negative returns of the Trae plus Dejounte thing, the way it hasn't worked, where the Hawks are going, not necessarily rebuilding, but trying to focus and be a little bit more balanced for the future, they will definitely miss Dejounte in certain ways. He's a very good player. But I would have done this deal. I think it sets the Hawks up pretty well in conjunction with other stuff that they're going to have to do in the future and what they've already done now with Ricochet and other stuff on the sides. But overall, I like it for Atlanta. I don't love it. I'm not throwing a parade, but I would have done this if it was the best offer, and I'll leave it there for now. But we'll have much more, I promise you, in a second about this trade and what the Hawks are getting, what the money stuff is, the roster situation, and more. But first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is an off-price ticket marketplace at the NBA that makes getting tickets for basketball or baseball or anything you're looking for faster and easier. They have killer last-minute deals. They have all-in prices, usually receipts, and the lowest possible price guarantee. It makes them a fantastic option at Gametime for all things tickets. I've been using Gametime for a long time now, and it's really come in handy for me for Braves tickets, Falcons tickets, as well as other shows and concerts across the city. And while I don't pay to go to Hawks games, you can definitely get your Hawks tickets at Gametime as well. Gametime also has flash deals. They actually save there. They actually save even more when you choose the section and actually let them choose the seats in that section for you. There's an awesome feature where you can actually toggle to show the total up front and have no surprise fees at the end. That's an awesome one for me. And you also get a panoramic view of the actual seats that you're going to have in the app before you buy them, and the lowest possible price guarantee with Gametime. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with the folks at the Gametime app, and download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, and I focused heavily on, of course, the Dejounte side coming out of the first segment, and that's definitely the headline of this, no question about that. I know the Hawks are sending him out, but he's the best player in the trade. That's the big story nationally, locally, etc. But the Hawks do get 2 real pieces back in this trade, in addition to the picks. Now, I will say the picks are a big part of this. I'll start there first. I talked about them, what they are already. That Pelicans pick by way of the Lakers in 2025 is a very interesting pick. And look, the Hawks have a future picks problem. They were down 3 picks from the Dejounte trade originally from San Antonio. These are not their own picks back, which would have been even better, of course. But restocking the cupboard is an important thing here because it's the combination of being not very good, like the Hawks were this year, and also not having future picks is the disaster zone in the NBA. So having picks in the future to restock the cupboard is a big thing. Anyway, Daniels and Larry Nance Jr. I've always liked that. That's Daniels. I talked about him a lot in the draft 2 years ago. He was a fast riser. He got to where the Hawks were not going to be in his range, but he was on my radar a lot that draft cycle in 2022. He's only 21 years old, turned 21 in March. He's a 6'7" perimeter player, has played some point guard, but mostly is kind of a hybrid wing player. Good passer, good feel on offense, took a step forward as a player inside the arc this year, shot 55% on twos, and had a lower turnover rate this year, some steps forward for sure. The big question, though, on offense, I can't sugarcoat it, is his perimeter shooting. He's a 31% shooter from three-point range in his career and not great at the free throw line. So the mechanics there are not great. That was the pre-draft worry for him. It still is now. That's going to determine his offensive upside. If they can make him into a solid enough shooter, there is so much to like with Dyson Daniels, but I'm certainly willing to admit there's some downside there. But look, even with that shooting, he's been a rotation caliber player already in his career this year on a pretty good Pelicans team. So he's already proven he can play. It's just whether he can actually stick as a starter or a top 7 guy on a real team if he can knock down shots. With that said, the major appeal for Daniels is his defense. He is very, very good already as a perimeter defender with real size at 6'7" with length. He was 88th percentile this year in defensive BPM. That's only one metric, but he's really, really strong across the board in advanced defensive metrics. He has a 92nd steal rate. He's great hands, really good athlete, good rebounder for a perimeter guy, checks a lot of boxes defensively, and it's really exciting to have that. Honestly, there's real lottery talent here, I would say, for Daniels. And while the Hawks, I've been ranting about this for basically 2 years now, that the Hawks' number one problem, and they had more than one, was perimeter defense and point of attack defense. Now, yes, you still have Trey, who's not great on the end of the floor, very clearly, but they have Kobe Buffkin, who's already good on that end of the floor. Dyson Daniels, who is excellent on that end of the floor. Ricochet profiles that way as well. So they are obviously taking steps to address that major issue. And Daniels doesn't help the shooting, but Nance might, and Ricochet should, and then we'll figure out the rest later. But notable there. I like him a lot. The shooting is a question, but he still has 2 more years of rookie contract. That's very valuable. And for me, he immediately becomes the best wing defender on the roster. Or always perimeter, guards or small wings defender on the roster. And plus, he's versatile, he's physical, etc. I like him quite a bit, and we'll see what that looks like in Atlanta. From there, Larry Nance Jr. is a lot less flashy than Dyson Daniels. He's 31 now. I actually just saw a tweet a minute ago that I think it was from Larry Nance's wife. They're putting their kids down as he was learning about the trade. Larry Nance is an adult. He's been around for a long time. Very solid defender. He's consistently been a part of good teams on defense as a key cog. Not a dominant defender by any means, but a solid one. He can shoot it a little bit. A very low usage player overall. He's the epitome of a role player. Not going to create shots for you, but shot it well at the rim this year. He finishes around the rim effectively, 70-ish% the last 2 years. Rebounds the ball very well. Quality passer for a big man. Good steal rate. Just a rock-solid professional rotational big. He's not going to probably be your starter, nor should he be at 31, but I think he's going to be a quality backup. We'll get into it more in a second. The Hawks do have kind of I won't say log jam, but they have a lot of guys, let's just say, in the front court right now, but he fits very well, I would say, in Atlanta as a veteran, as a depth piece. Plus, the Hawks might move on from Okongwu or Capella, I would say, in the coming days. If they do that, having Nance to kind of provide some depth will be huge. So that's my kind of mini scout. I will obviously admit I don't cover these guys. At least I haven't until right now. But I do cover the whole league, and I've watched these guys play a lot. So I don't have the same Hawks-level expertise on other players, but I have asked around. I will probably endeavor to have someone from New Orleans on the podcast to talk a little bit about Daniels and Nance in the future. But for now, that's the synopsis, and we'll have more in a second when it comes to the rest of the machinations. Because before we get out of here, I want to talk about kind of what the roster looks like and also the money side of this, because undeniably, part of this trade, some of it, a portion, I don't know how you want to put that, might have to do with the fact that they're saving some money. So there's that, and we'll get into all of that and more in a second. But first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. All right, I'm going to try not to go an hour, so I'm going to do this kind of quickly, but just want to reset a little bit on what the Hawks look like roster-wise coming out of this. I did a segment on the podcast again earlier today about roster decisions that have to be made around Saddiq Bey and Pete Krejci and Garrison Matthews, Bruno Fernando by literally tomorrow, by Saturday. Seth Lundy, it was reported by Mike Scotto, I actually heard the same thing, that he actually got his qualifying offer. So that's notable, but he'll not be a restricted free agent. It might be on a two-way, but could be the minimum. We'll see. And we don't know yet about Juricic coming over this year. If you listened to that podcast earlier, I shared some audio from Landry Fields. There's some we're not really sure what's going to happen there with him short term, but noting all of that, here's what the Hawks have on their roster right now today. Trae Young and Kobe Buffkin are really the only small guards on the team, like pure guards, Trae and Kobe. Smaller wings / guards, like 2 guard size guys. Bogey, of course. Daniels, the new guy. Maybe Garrison Matthews, maybe Juricic. Those guys have decisions. Garrison's on a team option. Juricic could be stashed overseas. We'll see. Forwards, Jalen Johnson, Risa Shea, DeAndre Hunter, and Muhammad Gay are still on this team. And then the bigs, they have 3 really strong centers, Capella, Okongwu, and then Nance, and then maybe Bruno Fernando, who's on a non-guaranteed contract. So, lots of names there. One thing I'll just say plainly for you, I will be pretty surprised, and this is without a ton of intel right now. It's very early since this trades actually happened. I've been scrambling the last hour or so. I was out when the deal happened. But I'll be surprised if Capella, Okongwu, and Nance are all on the team in August. It's not impossible, but Nance played almost 100% of his minutes this year at center for New Orleans, about 80% last year at center. He can play a little bit of the 4, but I think he's mostly a center at this point. Maybe with Okongwu and Nance together might work, but of course you still have Jalen. You want to see Mo Gay, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that it'd be wise if the Hawks did not have all 3 of those centers on the team, if I had to guess. And look, I said this before, I'll say it again. They probably need one more shot creator on this team in the absence of Dejounte. Now, you got Jalen Johnson, who will probably do a little bit more this year. I'm not sure he's a number 2 just yet on a good team offensively. Trey's still the lead guy, you would imagine. They got Bogey. Bogey's obviously a guy who can scale up a little bit, but you want to watch his minutes a little along the way. You got Kobe Buffkin, can run some pick and roll stuff. We'll see. And then you got Dejounte. So not Dejounte. Sorry, Dejounte did run a lot of offense, I should say, is what I have in my notes here. And they have to have a plan to mitigate that. So maybe Risa Shea a little bit, tiny bit, but I wouldn't recommend that a ton as a rookie on ball. So there might be one shot creator short at this point. Bogey is a nice guy to have in this situation. Obviously, he and Dejounte are very different players, but Bogey is a guy who can scale up when he needs to. But just an area to kind of circle in the coming days. Now, that's the roster contractually. So Dejounte is starting a 4-year extension for about $25.5 million this first year, going up to 31 by the end. He also has a massive trade kicker in that contract. So we don't know for sure right now whether this deal is going to happen now, pre-July 1st, or as far as like this league year or next league year. The addition of Liddell makes it a little bit closer, but I was trying to figure out how this is going to work money-wise because Dejounte makes a step forward with his extension money-wise, and then has, again, according to Bobby Marks, the largest kicker in the entire league for trade kickers. So we'll see, but this deal is going to happen. I'm not sure if it's going to happen like officially, in the next couple of days, or maybe they'll wait till July. I don't know yet. Just keep that in mind. Daniels is his 3rd season of his rookie deal. He's making about $6 million this coming season, about 7.7 in his 4th year. The Hawks will have to very likely pick up that team option by October. I'd be surprised if they didn't do that, obviously, but notable. And look, this deal does save money. Larry Nance is actually an expiring contract. It's about $11 million or so for this year, but it's expiring. So both Nance and Capella combined for like $33 million or so, but it's coming off the books after this coming season, I should say. So this move saves money for the Hawks this coming season. So I'm not breaking any new ground here, but if you are a regular listener, or even if you're not, the belief is that the Hawks do not want to pay the tax this year. I have gone out of my way to say that it's not a total 0% chance, but most people in the league just don't buy it that they're going to pay the tax. And now with this move, they go from over to under, at least for now. Before today, they had about $167 million in guaranteed contracts, including Risa Shea. Now, that number is about 161, and they have 2 more players on guaranteed contracts between basically a 3-for-1 deal. Then if you throw in Garrison and Bruno, you're still like $5 million or so below the tax line. Now, that does not include anything for Veet nor Sadiq Bey. Keep that in mind. Plus, there are decisions to make on Bruno and Garrison. Also, if they want to keep Liddell, which is I'm not sure about that, then they have a roster spot issue potentially, especially when you start factoring in Juricic. If they want to bring back everybody, there's some machinations to be had there, especially with Bey, because Bey, I think Veet's going to be relatively cheap. I think Bey has more nuance, so we'll see how that all goes. But that's the current situation. So look, that's enough for now on all of these things. I'll have much more in the future when we have all the T's crossed and I's dotted. But overall, the Hawks did lose the best player in the trade today, which is a little bit scary. I understand that, but they do restock the draft cupboard. I said it before, but they now definitely have a pick in 25. They could have 2 picks in 25. They have a first in 27 they didn't have before. They still have their own pick at 26, not their own pick, but they have a pick. It's swapped. They have a pick at 26. So right now, the Hawks suddenly went from not controlling their draft at all. And look, they don't control their own draft, but they do have at least a pick in the next 3 drafts. That's something after losing what they had lost in the Dejounte trade. Plus, they get the real prospect in Daniels. They got a reasonably priced bet in Nance. So I would say overall, they've really improved the last couple of days when it comes to defensive personnel and overall size. Now, that doesn't make them better overall right now because Dejounte is the best player on the trade. But bringing in Risache, who, look, I'll be the first to say, I'll probably say it 100 times, rookies are not always great in the NBA. That's what I always say. But he does have real positional size and defense potential. Nance is a good quality defender in the front court. Daniels might be an excellent defender. I know he's good. He might be excellent. So, and more Kobe Buffkin, you presume, on the court. And I think that will be a plus for your defense, especially at point guard. So we'll see. But to wrap it up, I still don't think the Dejounte trade pairing was going to work long term. They rectify that with this move. They tried it. They tried the big swing over the objections of some people, including maybe Travis Schlenk. But they overpaid for Dejounte. They gave it 2 years. It just didn't work. They had to break it up. They made a solid trade here. Now we'll see what happens, but they do have more work to do for sure. Pressure is not off. And I know just by my comments that I've seen so far on YouTube and on Twitter, etc., that not everybody loves this trade. And I totally get it because if you're just like zooming in from the outside and you don't know anything about the context, you're trading a really good player and not getting a great player back. And I understand. So there's nuance here. I am the captain of the nuance context train, but it won't be 100% beloved. I'm sure that Landry and company know that in the front office, and how they handle this moving forward will be very interesting. All right, that's all I have on the emergency podcast. I will have more, I promise you, coming. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow. We'll see what happens with the Bay decision and the Krejci decision, etc. I will have new content in the next couple of days for sure. But this is the 7th show in the last 4 or 5 days, so I'm going to try to not have one, hopefully tonight. No more big trades, maybe until at least tomorrow. But please, if you're a new listener, subscribe to the podcast. Like this video on YouTube and also subscribe there. But also check us out on Apple and Spotify and Overcast. 5-star ratings and reviews. Very much appreciated to help us be boosted up there. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. Also, if you want to follow more of my work on the Hawks and sometimes the Braves as well, I am at patreon.com/BT Rowland. I very much thank you for listening to the podcast. Hopefully this was out as fast as I possibly could. I promise you, folks, I was not home when this happened. I got it out as fast as I could. So hopefully you were patient enough and you will enjoy this on your Friday night. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll see you all next time.